Carol, I'd like to go to you here first, just to talk about the fact that the experiences for some people across the union or members, particularly in their workplaces, are that, yes, it's 2022, but people are still saying things that are not okay, and people are still hearing comments and phrases that really they shouldn't be in 2022.
Indeed, in 2022, and we have to say also in unison, I've said at the beginning how important unison's commitment to equality is, but that doesn't mean that while, as staff we hear about our work, but also for members, we won't experience prejudice and discrimination. And I think that is particularly hard. Anna talks a bit about about our own vulnerability. Sometimes we go into a situation and put on our armour or whatever, our Teflon shields, but sometimes we go into a situation and then come up against attitudes that we find really shocking when we don't expect it, and that can be harder to deal with. And again, I think we have to be frank with each other. We don't all agree with each other on every single aspect in unison, but what we do need to hold on to is unison's policy and values, and of course that doesn't necessarily give you an answer in every situation, but we do have strong policy in so many equality areas, and people should be confident when they meet. Well, unison in its rule book, in the opening pages of the rule book, its founding principles are promoting equality and tackling discrimination. There is can become a bit of a jargon thing, but there is zero tolerance of prejudice and discrimination in unison. That is our starting point. I'll pause there.
Thanks, Carola. Anna, anything to add in terms of that, the commitment on behalf of Unison and the fact that those principles are very firmly laid, but then ultimately people's reality, which is that that's not always what they're seeing and hearing in their day jobs?
I think just for me, it's a massive surprise when I sort of open an email and it's very unpleasant, because if it comes from a member, I think I have a perception of union members, who they are, how they are, what they think, that yeah, we've got the same values, you'll believe the same, but actually, as Carola said, people have differences of opinions. But I think it's when the messages are quite vile and quite nasty. I think people just forget that there's actually a person at the other end of that email account. There's a person at the other end of that social media account that has to read, what's being said. But I think it's just, for me, it's just a difference in what I'm expecting from a member to what's, to the reality of it. But then the union does have a stance, and there is a process of how it's dealt with, and I'm quite comfortable in just chucking things across to Carola and saying, go on, off you go, please deal with this one, before I respond, which is something that you don't want me to do, so you can go off and deal with it. So there is a process, and you do feel supported when that happens. For me, I send out Black Action Quarterlies, which is the newsletter for Black members. And without fail, the following day after that's gone out, I come into something, I come into an email, and it's just, I think for me, it's just the sheer number as well.
For the people watching this, and for us as well, to remember that just because someone works for a union or is a member of a union, and you see this in other kind of mission-driven organisations as well, things like charities and education establishments, that doesn't mean that this stuff isn't going to happen. So it's for other people, for their colleagues, for people who interact with them, to act as allies and to make it clear that, well, these are the expectations of the union, these are the expectations from, you know, me as a person or in my team or whatever it is, and to make it clear that actually that behaviour isn't welcome, because it's often only by getting that message consistently from lots of people that it can sink in. Alex, I want to come to you here because I know you've got a bit of perspective to share on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a regional organizer, and previously I was an area organizer and a local organizer before that, my experience is very much on the ground within branches. And I think branches struggle to fill roles. We know they struggle to fill roles at elections and at AGMs. You know, the priority is the holy trinity of the secretary, to the chair, and the treasurer. I think the equality officer, let alone the LGBT, the black member, or the disabled member officer, is very low down the pecking order. And unless somebody voluntarily comes forward for that role, I think it's hard to fill it. And I think as a consequence, branches are missing out on a lot of information. You know, and I assume if you're not subscribed to Black Action, you don't get Black Action. You know, those kind of newsletters and circulars. So very often equality is driven by the regions. It's driven by the organizers working in the regions. It's not a priority for our branches. Our branches look at casework. That's their rallying cry. And you do have to turn their heads to look at it and to force them to look at it. And I think the Black Lives Matter movement is something that particularly they needed to look at and address with their employers. What are you going to do in response to this? And we had some good reactions to that, but I think it is a challenge. I don't know how many number one priorities Unison has, but there seems to be a plethora of them, whether it's recruitment or organizing or campaigning or equality. Everybody claims to have the number one slot. So we're competing. Equality is competing with recruitment stats. Equality is competing with campaigns. And unless we, as equality leads, turn people's head towards our sanctuary or our light, then, you know, it will remain a challenge, I think.